All right, so this is another addition to the kind of book series that we're doing on the channel. I actually recently finished, and by recently I mean yesterday, finished Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Shout out to my mother-in-law who got me this. She got me a bunch of Mitch Albom books, and this was one that I had pretty low expectations coming into. I don't know why. I had just wrapped up Mickey 7 and it was a change of pace, so I had to kind of like, go from a sci-fi into a more real book. So kind of the context on this book is it's written from the perspective of Mitch Albom, and he had a professor when he was in college that he really related to, and as time went on, obviously he graduated and he was really close, like really valued Morrie's wisdom. And then as time went on, he eventually ended up pursuing his career and chasing things in his life that he didn't necessarily, in the end of the book, he didn't necessarily want or need to be chasing. And the whole book is kind of a realization of that and just like an appreciation of Morrie. So I thought it was an awesome book. I wrote down a couple of notes and we're just going to dive into some of these right here. So I think it's also important to note that Mitch was living his life and he saw on the news that Morrie was being interviewed because he wanted to somewhat document the process of him, not him dying, but him mentally preparing for death. And so that's kind of what rekindled his desire to see Morrie and to actually go and pay him a visit. So Mitch goes to Morrie and they hang out every Tuesday, and that's kind of where all this wisdom is transferred from Morrie to Mitch. And that context is important because the first thing I've written down is what Mitch outlines for what he wants to talk about with Morrie and what questions he wants to ask. So some of those topics include death, fear, aging, greed, marriage, family, society, forgiveness, and a meaningful life. And this was kind of Mitch Albom's communicating framework for, every Tuesday he would touch on a major topic like this. And he outlined it pretty early in the book before they actually started to have these discussions. And I just thought it was so interesting that you find out that someone you care about deeply is going to die, and outlining questions or topics. And this is kind of the scope that he ended up picking. And I'm not Mitch, but I would love to know the thought process behind picking all of these subcategories, because they talk about it in the book. They talk about the topics, but I would be more so interested in what led him to pick those things. And I can kind of assume based on the story, but it would be nice to have clarification and hear it from Mitch himself. So that's why I wrote that one down. That was like truly making me think too. If someone in my life were about to pass, what would be my framework for questions I would ask, and topics I would touch on. So diving into kind of my first real takeaway, it was Morrie, and he was talking. He was telling Mitch that we're all going to die, just nobody believes in it. Once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. And he furthers this statement and furthers this concept with the idea of a bird on your shoulder, bird singing on your shoulder. And he said, if you listen to that bird saying you will die, you probably wouldn't be as ambitious as you are. He's talking to Mitch because Mitch has lived this crazy ambitious life, has been succeeding at his work, and when it comes to having those ambitions, Mitch had progressively felt more detached, and he doesn't really go into a ton of detail on that, but um, that was kind of Morrie's takeaway of, you haven't even lived. All you've done is work. Um, and that to me is pretty impactful. Great, great theme. And it connects to that one quote that I've heard a million times. A man has two lives, and the first ends when he realizes he's gonna die. So that's pretty solid. But second concept, so many people walk around with a meaningless life thinking what they're doing is important. And this one really resonated with me because it's so easy to get caught up in your world. And it's so easy to kind of pretend that what you're doing is changing the world, or what you're talking about, like even this, like even the podcast and familial media. I think it's a great mission. It has a bigger mission than anyone knows as of now. But diving into um, this and understanding that its place in the world, let alone content creation, is so small, and that concept kind of makes me more excited than anything, because so many people think in numbers as millions or billions even, but there's people who live their life and they're completely content with just doing what makes them happy. And it's I laugh now because it's kind of one of those topics that you say it out loud, and it's so simple but yet so beautiful. And I think that's the life that I'm chasing, and I really admire how Morrie puts it. Like, you have to humble yourself. Like, we're all gonna die. Um, so I, and that sounds morbid, but it's true. Like, humble yourself. My brother and I, we had a clothing line. It was called Hustle 168, and that was one of the designs we had. It was a grave site, and on the epitaph it said, "You're going to die." And it wasn't supposed to be scary. It was supposed to be a design that makes you realize that time is fleeting. Like, what are you doing? You should be in pursuit of what makes you happy. So that was really kind of the thought process that put me through. And this book is really good for one-liners. I will say Morrie is so full of wisdom, and they're not empty one-liners. They're one-liners that had a lot of thought behind them that you really have to like digest. So a lot of this is that. Just so you know, uh, this is a question that Morrie asked. Do you think since I'm dying, I shouldn't care what's going on in the world? In a strange way, I feel more connected to the world than I ever have. And the context of this is, Mitch came over once, and Morrie I think, had a newspaper, had the news on, and Morrie was going into detail that, you know just because he's dying, he feels more connected, or, whoa, sorry, he's dying yet he feels more connected to the world than he ever has. And they were watching the news, and it was something overseas. I think it was in the Middle East or something, but a family had tragically passed, and Morrie was crying. And I liked Mitch's kind of viewpoint of, he was saying that he won't even shed a tear for his old professor and his old friend, getting ready to pass. Yet Morrie is bawling his eyes out for a family he's never met, and a family that's overseas. And I thought it was just a good perspective switch to have. Like, I'm not close to death. I hope. And Morrie was, and he was more in tune with his emotions. And I think the takeaway from that is, you can always be in tune, and you can always, kind of be empathetic of certain situations. It's just a matter of getting there. So that concept made me want to get there and find that empathy. Next concept is, most important thing in life to is to learn to give out love, and also to let it come in. And this is advice. Majority of this is advice from Morrie um, to Mitch, but that one I thought was very special because it's so easy, especially as a man, especially as a man, growing up and maybe not receiving as much affection or not knowing how to give affection. Um, it's a balance, and Maury literally details it as the most important thing in life. So taking time to give love and also know when to let it come in or maybe even take that affection is very very important. And I didn't really have any major takeaways, except for it's something that I think I've got through when I was like 18 maybe, or 17, but I thought it was a valuable lesson to still write down and share here. A good reminder. um this right here, it was a quote from Mitch. He said, and he realized that Morrie was on his way out, and he said, "Our time was running out, and I had to do something." And I think the next thing that he does is actually he starts filming the time he has with Morrie, which kind of made me feel like I'm in a better place with content and with media. It's not necessarily a chase of clicks or views, it's documenting important messages and things that I've learned and I'm learning for my future kids and even for my future self. And that is so important to know, and to remind yourself that it's bigger than you. And I think Mitch had a great understanding of that. Like, look, time is running out. I need to, you know, help, help. Like, I'm not the only one that is, it that it can derive value from Maury's words and wisdom. So I thought that was very powerful to note. Just while it came very late, where Morrie was on his deathbed, having that realization that time is fleeting is exactly what Morrie wanted Mitch to have. So, um, right here, this concept was pretty interesting to me. Morrie begins to love being dependent, and I have a correlation to a different book that we're gonna do a review here in a bit. But essentially, Morrie Morrie's idea was once someone eventually starts wiping his ass, he's gonna feel very defeated and kind of and understand that it's his time. Yet when it happens, he tells Mitch that he actually is enjoying being dependent, and it's a whole new lesson that he has to learn. And it's so funny because I had just read, I say just read, but at the start of the year, I read Love Does by Bob Goff. It's one that I want to cover on here. But Love Does by Bob Goff, he actually gets in an accident and kind of totals his Jeep. And the guy was a lawyer, so he could have gotten a car at any point, but he was so independent in his life and he wanted to learn the concepts behind being dependent, and he wanted to learn how to actually be dependent itself. And in that he found a lot of freedom, and he learned a lot about counting on others. And I think that's, well, it's very different. It's a car and a life. I think it carries a very similar weight to just remind you it's okay to count on others. It's okay to depend on others, and you just need to make sure that the person you're depending on is right. And that made me think about my wife, so I wrote that one down. If you live a fulfilled life, you won't fear aging. You'll look forward to it. And this is it's so funny because the best thing about reading and the coolest thing to me is you kind of learn how to articulate how you feel without necessarily coming up with it yourself, or it's feelings that you've always felt, you just didn't know how to articulate. And this is exactly what that was, because I've never been afraid of, like, growing up, and yeah, again, it's actually one of the things my wife and I agreed on when we were very early in our relationship. Like, aging is exciting, and I don't know, if you desire to be younger, then you're probably not happy where you're at, and or you just got given bad hand in life. So um, either way, you're probably not fulfilled. And I thought that was just an amazing concept that Morrie told Mitch, because for more context, Mitch was talking about how old he felt and how he's no longer the young shot in his career, and Morrie kind of pinned it on lack of fulfillment. Next, do not envy, accept who you are, and revel in that. And I've always been pretty decent at being myself, but I never shy away from a reminder. And I think that whole concept is, don't be jealous, do not want someone else's shoes. You have to accept who you are, and you really have to own it. I think he uses great word choice in describing that. Love each other or die. That's one of the big um, concepts or big quotes that Morrie says quite frequently. Um, you have to learn to love each other, and it connects to his take on dependency. He says, and this is the last takeaway. Says, "You're not a wave; you're part of the ocean." And I read another book that I want to talk about here, but just to touch on um, this concept, you're not a wave, you're part of the ocean. It's so easy to kind of see your life go up and down and up and down. And when it's settled, you have to understand that there's another wave coming. And when you're at your lowest, there's another wave coming. And when you're at your peak, there's another wave coming. So it's a pattern and it's life. And I think that is, again, it's one of those ego checks. Like, hey, you're so small in this big ocean, and you're trying to act like it's the only thing that um is going on in the world. So or the ocean, I should say. So I thought that was a great concept, and again, one of those ego checks that I think we all need. Like, even myself, um, we all get into those headspaces where you might not be egotistical, but you feel like your life is or everything going on is I don't even know how to articulate it. Let me think. It's not a feeling of feeling more important than other people around you, but you kind of get caught up in your world. Is what I'm trying to say. When in reality, there's so much stuff going on, and I think the mindset of going so far out in the ocean, of saying like this is happening across the world, and like stressing about it, and it's equally as hurtful as looking so far inwards and being super um self-centered. I think that's how I wanted to articulate that concept, because I don't yeah, I think that's how I wanted to articulate it. I'm gonna leave that in because that was a whole thought process behind it. um and that one really had me thinking. But yeah, I thought it was a great way to describe it. And maybe I missed the mark on the quote and what value it takes, or it's trying to make. And if I did, feel free to give me your thoughts in the comments. But um, I think that is it. You're not egotistical, but it's easy to feel like your life is like everything around you is just, it's all caving in. And even if it's not caving in and it's really good, you still have to look outwards and understand that it's so small in the grand scheme of things. I think that's it. But that's all I wrote down when it came to the book. The book was amazing. I highly recommend. It's very short. probably, I want to say it was a little over 200 pages, and I learned a lot and took a lot of value away for especially how short it was. So, highly recommend. I'm on to my next book. I'm reading Brave New World, but there's still two others I have to cover on here. So I appreciate you guys for watching. If you stuck with it, please feel free to let me know your thoughts, or if you've read the book, definitely let's talk about it. Maybe come on for a podcast or whatever. Um, yeah, I appreciate it, and take care.